Money FM 89.3. Best of breakfast. Mind your business. Only on Money FM 89.3.
Welcome to Mind Your Business with Audrey Seek and Ryan Huang. Now, it started with just two people, a founder and a trader, sharing a big vision in the early days of electronic trading. Now, fast forward to today, and that tiny team has grown into Grasshopper, a trading firm that now executes more than $500 billion in trades every month. They're at the forefront of Asia's fintech scene, blending cutting-edge technology with deep market expertise to transform how trading happens across global exchanges.
That's right. Going back to almost 20 years ago in 2006, James Leong was that first trader, working side by side with founder John Lin to build a firm from the ground up. From those beginnings, James has worn many hats, from trader to CFO, COO, and now CEO, leading Grasshopper's strategic growth and driving its innovation in an ever-evolving market landscape. So what is the secret behind Grasshopper's success in a competitive and fast-changing industry?
Yeah, joining us now is James Leong, CEO of Grasshopper, the trading technology provider. Good morning, James. How are you doing today?
Morning, Audrey. Morning, Ryan. I'm very good. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I guess the obvious question is, why Grasshopper? What does that name mean? And what do you do?
It's a great question. It's one of our investors' favorite questions to ask during the Q&As usually. And it was born out of an old TV show. I'm sure if many of you have go back long enough to the time where in the 80s, there was a TV series about a Western man who was educated in a Kung Fu temple. It was called Kung Fu, and David Carradine played a man called Kwai Chang Caine.
Oh.
And while he was training to be a Kung Fu master, his masters often told him, like, you have much to learn, young Grasshopper. So when John Lin was growing up in America, in New Jersey in the 70s, there really weren't many Asian kids around, and that movie was one of the seminal sort of influences for Americans to get to know about Asian culture. And that very quickly became his nickname in high school.
Ah, okay. It's a nickname for John Lin, who founded Grasshopper. So in a way, it's a bit of a parallel for your journey as well, starting from, I guess, smaller days for the firm and now leapfrogging or leaping to new highs as CEO.
Absolutely. I still remember the early days when we were walking into the UOB Plaza and starting to trade with leased softwares in 2006. It was such an unreal feeling for me, walking into a room full of screens, lots of guys yelling in a trading arcade. That was back at the UOB Schneider days. In the aftermath of the floor closing, there were quite a few of the prop traders that used to be on the floor that were in those arcades. But a lot of these guys were, traders at heart, and the Darwinian principles of what was going to be effective changed greatly, right? You could figure out how to trade, but then you couldn't figure out, what was actually happening out in the markets if you didn't try to answer some very interesting questions.
Yeah. So electronic trading was still in its early days when Grasshopper began almost 20 years ago. So what gaps did you see in the market back then, and how did Grasshopper kind of set out to fill these gaps?
Very good question, because in the early days, the whole idea of trading and for anybody starting to trade is trying to understand why the market's doing what it's doing, why it's going up, why it's coming down, when it does each one of these things. In the pits, it was actually quite straightforward, the signals you would get. You see brokers walk into the pit, and then the market does its thing, and then you know, hey, that's what happens. If a big number comes out and there's a news report, the market goes crazy, you try to figure out what are the triggers that leads to the reaction in the market. And you could see it was visceral, it was very analog. All of a sudden, you went digital. You need to figure out when a big order comes in, who's continually buying, why is the market moving the way it's moving. So we had to break down these questions and try to figure it out. It ended up with us investing into building our own algorithms, our own software eventually, which we launched in 2015. So it took us a good 9 years to get to that point, and significant investment. So right now in 2025, I think one of the key reasons why we survive is because we made that investment.
Right. So from those early days, having your own program, you then decided to become a full-stack tech-enabled trading firm. What was the thinking behind going down that route?
Well, I really go back to 2008 and 2009 when we first launched our own algorithms, because the developers that helped us build it were just focused on the mechanisms. If X happened, do Y, right? But we realized that the next question was, how does X happen? And how does the software actually play a part in X happening? Because we realized that using a software behind that scene is, you couldn't see what was happening at the front of that software stack. It's like owning a car and you open up the bonnet and it's all locked up. You didn't know how the engine worked.
Yeah.
So we had to figure out, how do we reverse engineer what the engine is doing? So we started in 2011 to build our own software and carried on from there, because we just kept learning more and more things. Even now in 2025, we're still learning things about how the exchange works, how our software has to work to interact with that in order for us to be more effective.
So speaking of carrying on from there, by 2015, you guys had rebuilt Grasshopper's platform from scratch and were already exploring AI and blockchain. And this is long before these became buzzwords, right? How are these technologies now integrated into your operations?
It's actually kind of funny, because we've been doing machine learning type and sort of techniques in our strategies for such a long time that I almost forget to talk about the fact that we utilize AI, right? Like, we don't think of it as AI the way that, ChatGPT is presented as a language learning model. We think of it as detecting patterns in data, in large batches of data. And our data sets tend to be very short-term versus your typical asset managers, multi-day, multi-month and year models. So we have very much had to integrate with that, because the technologically driven traders that we now work with very closely, they have utilized these techniques and they need that capability for a long time. So we've partnered with Google since 2018. We've grown with them. We've integrated our trading stacks with their technology. And we've had to be on the forefront, and if not the absolute cutting edge, of majority of these discoveries.
All right, talk about trading. I had my early impressions of Grasshopper as a prop desk trading firm. How much of that is still going on as part of your business?
We have completely evolved away from the prop setup. So we were a prop trading firm up till the start of 2024, end of 2023, when the asset manager went live. We've basically migrated all the trading strategies into the asset manager, and we currently operate 2 funds. Fixed income and growth fund that is primarily fixed income based, but multi-asset, and discretionary, very actively managed. And we have a second fund, which is the quantitative fund, where all the lower latency strategies reside, that traditionally what you consider Grasshopper strategies.
So this stat kind of sticks out to me. More than half of your team apparently comes from tech rather than, traditional finance folks. That's quite interesting for a trading firm, right? So why make this choice?
Well, as we continued to invest into the technology in the early days, we realized how important it was for us to keep track with those investments. It enabled to create more capability as we add more markets and products to the platform. That really just increased our needs, increased the potential sphere of strategies we could run. So the more we built, the more we needed to build. And we're at the point whereby we're close to I would hope, the end of that explosive growth in terms of the manpower and the people required to maintain the technology. Now we are at the stage of hiring traders to utilize technology and basically deploy as many strategies as they can into the market, so that the fund can deploy more funds and then hopefully yield the investors more returns.
Yeah, interesting times, and of course a long journey starting back in the days of, I believe, 2006, 2007. And that was when we had the great financial crisis. What was it like starting the company at that moment? What do you go through?
It was a very, very busy time, to be honest.
Is it a good time because you get all this volatility as a trading firm?
The short answer is yes, it is a busy time, and it's usually a time of more opportunity for prop traders with more professionalized setups. Why? Is because we have the ability to react more quickly to anything that happens, right? We have the infrastructure, the supporters, the news, the ability to buy and sell seamlessly, because primarily at that point we were trading futures, right? If you're trading stocks, it's quite hard to short sell. Back then, I don't think it's that readily available, a facility. So if the markets were going the other way, you could respond more quickly. There was also a lot of dissonance, right? Because you could feel the pain, you could see people suffering, you could see all the news. So it was just, fortunately, I think for me personally, we were so busy. And, I'd worked 80, 100-hour weeks at some point of time during that period of time, because it was just nonstop. The internet was still sort of being developed in the infrastructure in the early days, so it couldn't be like I was trading at home. There were many occasions where the network would go down. I would have to drive into the office or take a cab into the office just to manage the situation. So the key thing, I think, is we learned a lot about how assumptions can be completely blown out of proportion. Majority of how people trade is based on back testing and observation. But the real value to me in a portfolio manager or trader is the ability to manage risk, to be able to change when you know that the fundamentals have changed. And that is a skill set I think that's very valuable nowadays, because it's been coming to 2 decades since we've seen crisis of that magnitude.
Yeah, and it's been 2 decades since you guys started, and you guys have come a long way. You know, you scaled from trading 1 million futures contracts a month to executing over $500 billion worth monthly, right? What's been the secret to scaling so quickly, even though, you know, we know that it's been an amalgamation over the past 20 years, but staying competitive and being able to scale globally, what is the secret to that?
I think we're, on one hand, right, really lucky, situated in Singapore. I think there have been confluence of factors. One is, I think there's ready capital here. 2, I think there's a fair bit of talent, even though that's very competitive these days.
Yeah.
Because of the landscape and the infrastructure Singapore provides, right, the vast majority of firms like ourselves, liquidity providers and market makers, the biggest firms tend to be located in either Hong Kong or Singapore, right? There's a bunch of options market makers in Australia, but the talent is here, Hong Kong, and Australia, and it's been there for a while. China and India is developing, but that's a whole different conversation. Thirdly, I think we've been at the forefront of access points, right? Like we can access any market from Singapore very easily, and that gives us a nice stable base to be able to trade throughout, right? We can meet basically any exchange, any broker based out of Singapore fairly frequently, and that gives you information, gives you access and knowledge base. I think from our side, as a firm, the investment in technology has been key, actually being able to foster good talents internally. I think that has been very much one part of our ethos. We try to be as nimble and as humble as possible. We very much have a no-ego ethos. It's a firm that I think people have valued, appreciated being in for a long time. So some of the chaps that have been around for a while have been well over double-digit number of years.
Yeah, that I think speaks to how well the company has been run. Talking about how the company is being run, as CEO, there is definitely a lot on your plate, including looking into the crystal ball. Well, what's next? What is going to drive the future of the business? What are you looking out for in terms of changes that are on the horizon, whether it's market changes or regulation changes? What's going to be the next big thing for Grasshopper?
Well, I think we continue to try to partner as many of the Asian brokers and exchanges as possible, because I think we are just about the only firm of this size that's genuinely born out of Asia, short of China and India, who have their own gigantic ecosystems. So we want to be able to help exchanges understand what algorithmic, quantitative, low latency market making is, how it's a legitimate part of every major developed Western exchange, especially even in Asia. I think there's Japan and Singapore are very, very forward-looking and tries to understand how to work together with these participants to build the right ecosystem for trading to develop. And an example of that is the work we're trying to do with SGX and MAS to try to engage them with regards to the stimulus that they're trying to put into the Singapore Stock Exchange, where we are actually quite a big part of.
All right. Well, James, we can't let you go without talking about your personal story. Let's not forget that you were the first trader of Grasshopper way back when, and you have gone from a trader to CFO, COO, and now CEO. Walk us through this journey and what you've learned.
Oh, I never in my life prior to joining Grasshopper expected to be in finance. So I was a psychologist working in MINDEF. I didn't read the money pages of the Straits Times back then. And it was really, truly the partnership and the mentorship of the founder that convinced me to give this a shot, right? And I took to it, like a fish to water, as they say. Immediately really got my feet, I think within a couple of months, tried to figure out, how the technology would help us understand the markets a little bit better and solving simple problems like, how do I send an order faster to the market, right? Things like that. So I think it was a natural sense of curiosity and sort of engineering mindset, as well as the style of learning that I'm accustomed to doing. I learn by doing, and I think that's really great in trading. Although right now, my colleagues and I often joke, right? If we try to apply for a job now for the same entry-level position, I don't think we will get it, because now the demands are so much higher when it comes to the actual qualifications. So I've learned a ton about how markets work, how people work, how liquidity works. And being a psychologist at heart, it boils back down to that bias. I see it as a people problem and how people try to solve issues when it comes to money. And that usually comes back to some element of the truth. Right. People are ultimately trying to solve very complex problems when it comes to money. And there are certain heuristics that we use. And I think that narrows down how behaviors work.
Yeah.
Yeah, to a large part, I suppose markets are all about psychology, so perfect fit for you. And we've been chatting with James Leong. He is the CEO of Grasshopper, one of Singapore's homegrown fintech firms, which have now really made its own place in the markets right now, executing over $500 billion in trades monthly. And I think going into its 20th year next year.
That's right. Almost 20 years, and we've watched Grasshopper make leaps and bounds as a tech-driven trading firm. And at the helm, we have to thank James Leong, CEO of Grasshopper, for joining us this morning. Thank you so much, James.
Thank you, Audrey.
Thank you. Lots more to come on the show. Stay with us. Money FM 89.3.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.